This is Matt Hurt at Obsessive Viewer on Twitter.
This is Tiny at Obsessive Tiny on Letterboxd.
And this is ObsessiveViewer.com's The Obsessive Viewer Podcast. And bringing up my notes.
I'm just sitting here thinking of companies right now. I damn near missed that, yeah.
Wow. Okay, you have $1 million. You have to... Oh, this is actually another really good one.
Okay.
You have $1 million. You have to spend it within 24 hours only on physical things. So you can't be like, oh, I'm going to pay off like any debt or whatever. Like it's a Brewster's Millions thing. So like you have to spend exactly $1 million in 24 hours or you lose everything, including your life.
Jesus.
Yeah. So what do you buy? Is the question.
Oh my God. Wow.
I know. It's really fun on the Patreon to do these.
Yeah.
So
you can't go over $1 million?
There's wiggle room, yeah, because
okay.
You can go over $1 million. You have to spend minimum $1 million.
Okay.
But you have to have it's not like, oh, I'm gonna buy a Harrier jet, and that's how you spend it. It's like you only have $1 million. Anything over, you have to pay out of pocket.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have an answer for that.
Right.
So, yeah. But yeah, if you listen to the Patreon feed, like me and Kirsten have been doing like those types of recordings.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. So yeah. Okay, well, welcome to the Obsessive Viewer. Okay, hello and welcome to the Obsessive Viewer. We're a movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show each episode. You can find more of our work at obsessiveviewer.com, more of our podcasts at obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. And you can like us on Facebook and join the Facebook group at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer. And finally, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where if you pledge the minimum rate of $1 per month, you will get access to an exclusive RSS feed with content that's recorded specifically for Patreon supporters. I'm Matt Hurt, and with me today, as usual, is Tiny. Hi, Tiny.
Hey, buddy.
How's it going?
It's going bueno.
Good. Word to your mother. I don't know why I just said that. No, just word of worry. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Just in case the mic is picking it up, there is a leak in my apartment that I have notified my maintenance people for my apartment complex 3 times about. So yeah, I'm gonna come home tomorrow from work and just be flooded with just water. Anyway, so yeah, that's why the sound could be potentially weird. So today, Tiny, we are talking about Chernobyl.
We are.
Yeah. The very well-received, very, highly, acclaimed is the word I was looking for. Miniseries that just ended its 5-episode run on HBO here like a week or so ago. Yeah, so I was really excited about this because I saw the trailer around the time that Game of Thrones was about to premiere, and it just looked really good. Like, I remember, like, messaging you and be like, hey, we should, I either messaged you or I thought about messaging you. Just be like, we should totally review this on the podcast because it looks really good.
Yep.
So that is really, that's the main topic for this episode. That's what we're going to do. We'll do non-spoilers and spoilers.
Okay.
But plot summary, according to IMDb, unless we have any new business to attend to or anything on your mind, Tiny?
No.
Good.
We'll get to that in Potpourri.
Nice.
Yeah.
I meant to mention in Patreon because I don't know if I was going to bring it up on Potpourri, but X-Files. Anyway.
Nice.
Anyway, plot summary according to IMDb for Chernobyl is in April 1986, an explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics becomes one of the world's worst man-made catastrophes. So, Tiny, we're just going to dive right into our non-spoiler review.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel going in? Well, okay, let's start this way. I think this would be fun. Before you saw this miniseries, which, by the way, was directed... I think all the episodes were directed by Johan Renck.
Johan Renck, yeah.
Johan Renck. And writer is Craig Mazin. Who, okay, so if I may, if you wouldn't mind indulging me for just a moment.
Please.
There's been a lot of, like, stuff about Craig Mazin online.
Really?
Like, well, I need to reframe that. So, there was a picture of a bunch of his writing credits and their Rotten Tomatoes score, and then the Rotten Tomatoes score for Chernobyl, which is like 96.
Right.
And it's like, just this is proving that if you keep working hard or whatever, you'll get there. Because like his other writing credits are like The Hangover Part 2, Identity Thief, The Huntsman Winter's War,
Scary Movie 4,
Superhero Movie. Yeah. Just not really good stuff. But from what I understand, and I've just kind of done a cursory kind of research and everything, like he's the co-host of a screenwriting podcast called Script Notes, which is really, really good from what I've heard. I've heard a few episodes of it at this point, but like he's a well-regarded like writer in Hollywood. Like he was brought on to work on, I think, the Doctor Strange script, and like he's done like he's a sought after like script doctor and everything. So I don't know, just to kind of put him in a box as like, oh, this guy did these things because these are his credits, doesn't necessarily mean that it's not like a night and day thing from like, oh, crappy stuff to Chernobyl. Like he knows his shit.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a little reductive to be like, oh, he did Scary Movie 4. But Chernobyl, I don't know.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my soapbox for the week. So Tiny, before we get into our actual non-spoiler review and stuff, you are much more knowledgeable about history and historical events than I am.
I am?
Yes. Were you saying... Did you say that?
I was asking. I was like, I am, really?
I wondered, and yeah, you are.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you know a lot more than I do. At least that's what I've always thought. So before watching this miniseries and going into it, like, how much did you know about the Chernobyl disaster?
Man, I really didn't. I didn't know a ton, really. I knew there was an exclusion zone, and I knew there was like a nearby city, and I knew that it was an accident. But I never like looked into the why. I never or like how. Like I just thought like, oh, somebody just kind of the equivalent of like falling asleep at the wheel.
Right.
I figured that's what it was, but I realized that I never actually ever looked it up, like what actually happened.
Interesting. And
I think a lot of people maybe never did as well.
Yeah.
But that was some of the most compelling parts of the series. But yeah, I didn't know a lot about it, and like there's so much. Some of what I did know is there's a lot of interesting science in the exclusion zone.
Yeah.
Like the way wildlife has matured and evolved and adapted, even like the fauna or flora. Fauna is animals. Sure. Flora is plants.
That sounds right.
The plants.
Yes.
English.
The killers in the happening. Spoiler
the villains. Villainous plants. But like the plants, like there's like leaves on the ground from like 1989 because they're so warped by radiation that they won't degrade properly. And
God,
like,
that's nuts.
Yeah, like I remember just reading stuff like that. I'm like, that is insane. That's crazy. So yeah, I knew a lot of general information, but I didn't know specifics.
Okay.
And so that's why I was so interested in this.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way, but a little more ignorant because I just knew Chernobyl as just a topic, like as like a buzzword in certain respects,
right.
like this is the next Chernobyl, or like I just knew like, oh, something happened there was a nuclear like meltdown. Like that's all I knew. Also, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare.
Yeah.
That was admittedly like the only thing I knew about it. That, and then also that terrible fucking Chernobyl Diaries movie.
God, that movie sucked.
It's so terrible.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, like you, I didn't know the specifics. I didn't know the why. I didn't know the ins and outs of it and everything. So when I watched the miniseries, I was very surprised with a lot of the stuff in it.
Yeah.
Very surprising information. But and to postpone the non-spoiler review even more, just real quick, what did you think of the fact that they have like a we talked about this a little bit earlier today, but like how did you feel about like them having a podcast with the writer and like throughout the whole experience, and the fact that the podcast is available on like HBO Go and HBO Now?
That was really cool. I wish so many more shows would do that.
Yeah.
Like have official podcasts. I don't think like production companies or distributors understand like how cost effective that is.
Right.
Because it's like you can do a podcast on a fucking iPhone. I mean,
yeah.
You don't need a crap ton of production value. And you don't have to go overboard. Just talk about it for an hour. It's like it can just be two people talking. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's all the Chernobyl podcast was. It was two dudes every week talking about one episode, and it was 40 to 50 minutes every time.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting and fascinating. And like they talk about the actual event itself. They talk about the show. They talk about what it was like to shoot some of this stuff. And it's like you're getting history and you're getting creative background on making the actual show. And it's like
it's such an amazing supplement to the miniseries.
There's so like and I love the fact that it's in an official capacity.
Yes.
And it's so much better than like these I don't know what you call
Tread
them.
lightly.
No, it's so much better than these TV shows like Talking Dead.
Oh yeah,
or
that are just celebrating it. Like
yeah,
it's cheerleading it.
Yeah, and it's not. They're so it's just celebratory, and it's not. I don't feel like we get a lot. I feel like I stopped watching it. I mean, I stopped watching The Walking Dead.
Right.
But it's not interesting.
Like they even
I don't
tried
know what
that,
it is about them.
Yeah, not necessarily to shit on Talking Dead and talking everything, but like I remember like in the final season of Breaking Bad, they did that. Like Chris Hardwick did like Talking Bad.
Okay.
And like for like I think like the series finale or the premiere of the final season or part B of season 5 or whatever you want to call it. But in that, like that really was the breaking point for me, where I was just like, yeah, this isn't for me. Like this talk show thing isn't the same as like discussion of it and anything. And especially Breaking Bad is a show that not requires, but is something that necessitates like deep discussions and everything. Right.
Analysis.
And so like I would not want to see like a talking Chernobyl thing.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, it's just, it's fluff. It's fluff.
Right. Well, and it reminded me of the post-episode shows of Game of Thrones, where stay tuned for after the episode for whatever. Right. And those were actually pretty good. Like D.B. Weiss and David Benioff talking about what happened in the show, and I actually enjoyed those. And I hope HBO runs with this, because there's so much good shit they do.
I think did they do that with Chernobyl also? I think they do that with like all their shows, don't they?
Yeah, they do. But like, I mean, the podcast. Like,
you were talking about the podcast.
Yeah, I hope they continue to do that.
Yeah, me too.
Because I mean, I think it's probably a unique situation, because I didn't realize that Craig Mazin had his own podcast.
Oh yeah.
I wonder if he like approached them and was like, "Hey, let me do this."
Well, if you like in the last episode of the podcast, he mentioned like he thanks Sagal, the co-host.
I can't remember his name. Peter
Sagal, I think.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, and I just want to thank, like he says, like, I want to thank you because I kind of roped you into this and everything, and you said yes and everything. So like, I think that was totally his thing. And what's also amazing is that he, like John August is his co-host on Script Notes, and like he, John August on his website is hosting like PDFs of every script from from Chernobyl.
Wow.
Like every episode script, and Craig Mazin tweeted about it and was like, hey, you can check out the scripts here and everything. It's just like, I love that level of transparency between creator and creation, or creator and audience, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah. I thought it was a great idea. And
yeah.
like I said, I hope not just HBO, but tons of shows
totally
do that. It's a great idea.
Yeah. I'm already emailing with Hulu and other streaming services to make us the official podcast of something.
Nice.
No, I'm not.
There's a lot of unofficial stuff out there for a lot of shows and movies and stuff. And
check out anthologypod.com, terrorjunkiespod.com.
I'm not saying that stuff's bad. I'm just saying it's cool that
in an official capacity.
That's what was actually cool about it. Yeah.
And I think that that's what makes it so interesting, is that especially with Chernobyl, because Chernobyl was one of those cultural touch points for like the conversation surrounding like media for the 5 weeks it was airing. Like everyone on social media was talking about Chernobyl.
Right.
And I just love that everyone, in addition to having that conversation just on social media, has this podcast to inform them and also kind of make the kind of cultural conversation a lot more informed.
Yeah.
And another thing I really liked about the podcast was that he pointed out like where he took like artistic license and like why he took artistic license here and there and everything.
Yeah.
It's so great. I really hope that they do it too.
Yeah.
Even if it puts us out of business. So let's go into our thoughts on Chernobyl, the miniseries. Yep. So we're going to go ahead and do non-spoiler and then spoiler review. So yeah, we're going to talk about non-spoilers, kind of in broad terms. How'd you feel about this documentary or this miniseries? I keep wanting to say documentary.
I know, it has that feel to it.
Oh yeah.
I 100% absolutely adored this on so many levels. To put a point on it, I don't think Band of Brothers will ever be dethroned as the greatest miniseries I've ever seen.
Right.
And I think objectively probably the best miniseries ever. So I think that's still at the top. John Adams was always a close second. But I think, for me, Chernobyl has dethroned John Adams as second best miniseries I've ever seen.
Nice.
I was just completely blown away. I was so eager to watch this. My wife would not watch it.
Really?
Because she doesn't like to watch things that she's not into horror or like extreme drama, because it just bums her out.
Upsetting. Yeah.
It just bums her out. And like, I totally get that, but I appreciate that personally. I'm into those kind of stories.
Right.
And so I was so eager to watch it that I went and watched it on my phone in my bed on a Monday night. So like the next day, I would usually watch it on Tuesday because it aired on Mondays. I'd watch it on Tuesday, and then on Wednesdays I usually go to the same location for work.
Okay. And
it's about an hour away. And so I would made sure I'd download the podcast and I would listen to it on the way to work Wednesday. So I had this like little routine with it.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, but I was just so into it, and like, I really had to stop myself researching it.
Oh yeah,
because I was like, I don't want to spoil the show,
right?
Spoil the show, quote unquote, by figuring out what actually happened, or because the way that the show is structured is just so absolutely brilliant.
The storytelling is incredible.
It turns it into this, that he focuses on this mystery of how this happened, and like, just there's this huge cast of characters, literally. And it's you could have told the story linearly or like in so many different ways, and I think Craig Mazin found like the perfect equation to tell the story. Like, and it's pretty unconventional,
right?
And I think that is what puts this above a lot of other like historical miniseries or historical films, depictions of real events. Is that the structure is the key to this series, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so, I don't want to say rich, but rich in detail and everything with with those cast of characters that they have. Like they're so well defined in their arcs and everything. And like the way that, and granted, like we know more about it because of the podcast and everything, but like like takes artistic license where it's needed. Like he makes characters an amalgam of different like real world people to get the point across. And it's such an interesting way to kind of compartmentalize this story, this like the story of the actions and inactions of people, and that led to this and has like led to disaster. But compartmentalizing that into such a way that is so easily consumable to mass audiences and not as heavy on like trying to understand like and keep track of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And like there are moments in this miniseries that were just utterly heartbreaking and we'll talk about that in spoilers, but heartbreaking and just so I have a coworker of mine was watching, and he's really into movies and TV, so we always talk about that kind of stuff. And like he kept asking me like, "Oh, you caught up on Chernobyl?" And I'm like, no, "I'm like 2 episodes behind." Like I fell behind, and I think a big part of that is A, anthology, but B, that first episode was it. Like the imagery in that episode, like some of the things in that episode will stick with me for a long time. Like there's a scene where the guy, like opens a door, like there, as like chaos is happening, is raining. He opens a door, or he holds a door open for some of the other guys to get through. And then like, as soon as he like lets go of the door, like you see just blood, just like drenching his hip. And it's just like that visual effect is just so haunting. Like the depiction of like radiation sickness and like what it does to human bodies is just really, really disturbing.
It's a literal nightmare.
It absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I totally get why Paige would not want to watch that.
Yeah.
It's just so, like I said, I don't want to say that it's gripping, but it's like, it's so captivating and horrifying in so many parts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved it. And Jared Harris, to point out, there's a really great cast here, and there's really great supporting characters, supporting actors, and everything. But Jared Harris is like on another level. He's fantastic. Stellan Skarsgård is amazing as well. Also, Emily Watson is fantastic.
Yes.
Everyone across the board is just bringing their A game.
Yeah.
So yeah. So about the kind of nonlinear structure, did you have any trouble like tracking what was going on, like the time frames and stuff? Because like it's pretty linear, really. Like we get the disaster, and then we get like each episode is like taking place kind of farther away from it in terms of time.
Right.
And then the last episode kind of circles back and shows like what caused it, which I thought was very inventive and interesting.
Right. It's very. I didn't have any trouble tracking like where we were in the timeline or anything like that, because they drop a lot of context clues and all that stuff, or just blatantly say how long it's been. But it was remarkably fluid, given the somewhat complexity of the storytelling techniques. I was really surprised when literally the opening part of the crisis was the reactor is already blown.
Oh yeah.
And it's like we start there, like, whoa, I figured it was gonna be one of those things where it's like, some guy just walking along on a catwalk. It's like, dude, and then like, oh, here's a rumbling, and I thought we were gonna get like a calm before the storm kind of thing. Yeah. And they completely skip over that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why'd they do that? That's weird.
Right.
And you start to find out, you're like, oh, because it's like a big mystery as to why, or it's like a big deal as to why this thing blew. Because I was still operating under the assumption that like somebody fell asleep at the wheel.
Just human error.
General. Right. Yeah. Something like that. Soviet. Soviets being Soviet. Soviets gonna Soviet. That's what I was thinking. And also, yeah, like, man, it's hard to talk about without spoiling it, but, just some of the character evolution, the way that it was handled, also non-linear ways, was very clever. But like I said, it's so well written, like some of the best writing I've ever seen in anything, that I don't think it's hard to track, even for like a a lay person, a lay TV watcher.
Yeah, someone who's just kind of watching in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's just, like I said, structure is, this is one of the best structured scripts and stories I've ever seen.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the kind of thesis statement, I guess, the kind of the truth behind lies and like what lies can do and everything is just such an interesting way to bring us into this story. And it's like the thing that kind of hooked me was I don't remember how to pronounce his name, but Dyatlov.
Yeah.
Like in that first episode where he's just saying like, no, you're incorrect. It didn't blow. It didn't explode. Like it didn't happen. Like there was such a strong just denial from him. Like it's so infuriating and maddening.
Yeah.
And it's such fascinating characterization as well.
Right.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. The metaphor of lies and truth that Craig Mazin whipped up for this is just so perfectly poignant. The metaphor of, and it's brought up in the last episode. This isn't a spoiler, but the main character has this metaphor of every time you lie, you incur a debt to the truth.
That is, and I love that.
And eventually
beautiful.
that debt has to be paid.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, how do you, like, that's some Shakespeare type shit right there. That's like really clever. Yeah. And I was like, that is a perfect way to put this because.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's funny because it's a microcosm of the Soviet Union itself because it was just literally decades of denial and putting Band-Aids on real issues. And eventually it all came to a head in 1991. And it was like, this is not sustainable anymore. And it's like, we can't turn a blind eye. We can't lie to ourselves anymore. And the Soviet Union collapsed, which I don't really know many details on that either.
Right.
But that'd be something interesting to research. But it's just and I don't think the show even came out and said that, but it's that the Chernobyl's kind of a microcosm of why the Soviet Union could not succeed and why that brand of communism doesn't work, or why communism has never worked. And it was a really, just because there's so many fictitious stories or even real stories out there about the flaws of the Soviet system, and there's some really great ones out there, some really good ones, but I think this is the perfect microcosm, the perfect story about how that system and that way of life is not sustainable and it doesn't work.
Right.
And it was woven so beautifully in this show. The dialogue and the writing just next level. Yeah.
Totally. And on that subject about the Soviet Union and everything, just real trivia. As a result of the series' depiction of the accident, the Russian government has announced it will do a version of its own with the true facts that the power plant exploded due to a bomb put by CIA agents.
Right. I've read that online.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That'd be funny.
So yeah, anyway, great miniseries. We can go into spoilers now and talk more in depth. Sure. So spoilers on for Chernobyl. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it on HBO. Really great miniseries, and come back and listen to our spoiler review. So spoilers on. Here's a clip from the trailer, of course.
Chernobyl is on fire. And every atom of uranium is like a bullet, penetrating everything in its path. Metal, concrete, flesh. Now, Chernobyl holds over 3 trillion of these bullets. Some of them will not stop firing for 50,000 years.
Tell me how to put it out.
You are dealing with something that has never occurred on this planet before.
Spoilers on for Chernobyl, which in my head every time I think of Chernobyl, I meant to check to see if this is the right wording, but in my head I wanted to call it Chernobyl, from the energy drink in Hot Tub Time Machine.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
nice.
I think that's what it was called.
I think you're right.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so that's me making light of something where thousands of people died.
Yeah.
Or 31. That blew my fucking mind.
That's still the official number.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's so insane.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of just really haunting imagery. Like episode 4 in particular for me was like just emotionally just devastating.
Mm-hmm.
That episode had the people shoveling the graphite off the roof in 90-second increments.
Right.
It had the whole subplot with the conscripted guy shooting the dogs. And just like when he saw the puppies, god damn it.
Yeah.
I was just like, that was rough.
Yeah.
And then also the thing with the firefighter's wife, like that. Let's talk about all those.
Right.
Go ahead, Tiny.
Well, I think what's this is an emotionally wrecking series, and it has to be because the event. Yeah. That's how the event was.
Right.
Just tens of thousands of lives destroyed, and I think what's in retrospect, I don't want to use the word funny and not haha funny, but what's funny is there are moments throughout the series where they kind of go into like slow motion and they kind of slow things down. Like, for example, when many of the townspeople gather on the bridge in the first episode to watch the fire, if you will. And they're like a mile away or something like that. Every single one of them died.
Yeah, that's God.
Yeah. And there's a moment where you see them all standing on the bridge and it goes into slow motion and the ash starts falling on them, which is highly irradiated and literally killed them. The metaphor, one of the brilliant scientific metaphors that was used was that their radioactive material releases invisible bullets.
That was so
I've never heard it described that way. And that's perfect.
That metaphor was fantastic.
Yeah. And so these pieces of ash all contain thousands or millions of bullets, and they're just invisibly firing into all these people as they're embracing and cradling their children, and the kids are dancing around and having fun and playing in this ash like it's snow, and it's almost like a little wink at the audience because we all know exactly what's happening. Yeah, but these people are none the wiser, and there's another scene where. What was his name? The firefighter's wife, Ignatenko. He gets sent to a hospital in Moscow. Yeah. She very passionately seeks him out, goes there and visits him, and they finally are reunited, and they're sitting there embracing each other. Yeah. And he's basically a walking uranium rod, and she's pregnant. And they slow it down as they embrace each other. And normally, it's a little like wink or like a little point of the finger, like this is supposed to be a beautiful moment, but she's basically killing herself right now. Right. And it's just like, unbeknownst to herself, and
it's so tragic and surprising that she survived.
Right.
Like when...
At a cost.
Yeah. When it's revealed that like, the thing with the baby, that was like I had to sit down and just sit with that for a while. Yeah. Like that was so... Just like the idea of all the radiation that was in her body going to the baby, and the baby dying within 4 hours of living, and the mother surviving, like that's just so strangely, tragically poetic in a way, but it's just horrific and horrible, horrifying.
Right, and what I appreciated about that technique is that there were. Again, thousands and thousands of cases in the real world where people had that experience. They were exposed to this invisible death that and they just didn't know. Yeah, they just didn't know it was there. There's no way it doesn't have a smell. It doesn't have a feel. There's no way to detect it without scientific machines, basically. Yeah. And these people were just none the wiser, just taking it in for, and it wasn't like for an hour. It was literally months, even years before they got that stuff capped off, and there wasn't radiation just flying through the air. And I mean, that's why those scenes were so poignant, I think.
Yeah, and the insanity of a government body just hiding it, like downplaying it so severely when they're confronted with scientists telling them like, no, this is this is a really horrifying thing that if we don't do this thing, it could destroy the entire continent. It's just so, the way that it depicts the kind of bureaucratic kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word that I'm looking for. It's escaping me. But like the government like cover up, I guess, or the downplaying it is what I said earlier.
The brainwashing kind of.
Yeah, is so shocking to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also, one thing I was completely unaware of was just how large of a crisis was averted.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it could have literally, like, the exclusion zone is like, I don't know, what is it, like 2,000 square miles or something like that, as it presently sits, but it could have been like the entirety of the Ukraine, and like, my geography in that part of the world isn't very good, but like, it could have gone all the way into like Poland, which is it could have been like almost 1 million miles, and like just literally half of Europe would be uninhabitable, and like you would have tens of millions, hundreds of millions of refugees who would have to leave, and like you couldn't drink the water.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, I had no idea that it was that much of a risk. And they successfully averted that, and I didn't realize how much, it's weird to say, I didn't realize how much of a success it was that Europe is still inhabitable 30 years later, you know. I had no idea.
Totally. And to answer your question, it's 2,600 square kilometers, which equals about 1,000 square miles.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just, so going back to episode 4, also the stuff with the dogs and everything, that was rough. So,
that was emotionally, that was the hardest for me.
Yeah, just the disconnect, and like the way that you have to be disconnected from that, and the way that they depicted that was really great. But also the probably the most gripping or weirdly intense, but intensely unnerving is the word I'm looking for. The roof clearing stuff.
Yeah.
That was just like when you see the guy with the boot, the gets stuck and everything.
Right.
Just like it's so just tragic and sad.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was so, that actually happened. Like, those people actually did that. I'm sitting here saying, I want to say that scene was so well conducted or so well shot, and you know, and it was, but it's like, it's strange to keep that context as you try to analyze the show, that like there were like 3,500 people who actually did that, and like most of them probably died and
totally
prematurely, but I appreciated it because it established the idea that your exposure to radiation is like, it's kind of like a finite number. It's almost like a pitcher. Like, you have a pitcher and you can fill up your exposure to radiation. So it's like, and you have that pitcher for your entire life. That's maybe not the best metaphor, but you know, and it's all about how intense the radiation is, what kind of radiation it is, how long you're exposed to it. And it's funny that, like, I'm not sure that not everyone realizes that those guys being exposed to that radiation for 90 seconds, they cannot have any more exposure to radiation throughout their entire life. Yeah. Or they will absolutely 100% die.
Yep.
And it's just interesting to think of that, because we see like Legasov and Sherbina, who are in a dangerous proximity to this reactor for months, and they eventually succumb. They have Legasov's different, but he would have died in an untimely way from his exposure to it. And it's funny because it's just the context is just really interesting. Yeah, that they're there for months on end, but then these other guys are there for 90 seconds, and they have the same risk, same level of risk. It's an interesting, or it's again, it's weird to say, but it's a clever way to depict it in a show. Right. How the variance in exposure and the level of radiation and there's all these different the amount of radiation that a person can withstand is an equation that you have to work out.
Yeah.
And it's hard to work it out.
Yeah.
Like you really can't.
And it's coming just down to, these are people's lives. It's just insane.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just crazy. Yeah. Well, so yeah. What else? The big scene at like the kind of finale, How did you feel about the way that it circled back and showed everything?
That, like I said, that was brilliant because I think we get this. It's super complicated. I mean, this is some of the most complex science that humankind has ever worked out. Mm-hmm. And so trying to describe it to an audience, I still don't really know how a nuclear reactor works.
Right.
I still don't really get it. I mean, sorta, but not really. And so it's explained a couple times in the show, and to see it, the visual, I think, of the red and blue plaques in that courtroom scene was really clever. Yeah. And I think that was one of the most clear depictions that we got. But I think why the scene of showing us the calm before the storm, like I said earlier, or like the lead up to the accident, why I think that was so important is to demonstrate the levels of responsibility. Yeah. Because Dyatlov and Brekhanov and Fomin, they're all, I would use the word pretty much evil. Yeah. In what they chose to do and ignore. And they were strictly driven by their ambition and just awful human beings. Yeah. But Craig Mazin said in the podcast, and it may have been in the show, I can't remember, that all three of them were operating under the assumption that you press this button and it will shut everything down. Right. So it's like we can kind of be reckless up to a certain point because we have this fix-all button. And that's where the flaw was in this system. Yeah. And so it's, those three guys are, like I said, they should, and I think Legasov said it in his audio recordings, whatever they're called, his memoirs, if you will.
1980s podcast.
There you go. Nice.
I guess 90s. Well, no, it was 80s.
It was 80s, yeah. He said they all deserve the bullet. They deserve death, and I agree with that. If you're a fan of capital punishment, right?
Or podcasts,
nice. But the greater crime is the cover up, and that's what I think that scene is so important in expressing. Yeah, is that the scientist years ago who was designing the RBMK reactor and found that flaw and reported it to the correct authorities, and those authorities kept it a secret. Whoever those people were, I don't know if it was Stalin or who ultimately made the decision, I don't know. They are even more evil and more responsible than Dyatlov.
Absolutely.
And those are our villains. Dyatlov and Fomin and Brekhanov are they're basically the villains, or the bad guys. Right. And it's funny because they're, compared to what the people who perpetrated that cover up, they're not that bad. Right. You know? Yeah. They're just kind of dicks.
Right.
Right. But it's just crazy the level of the level of denial and just
not just denial and just trying to
hubris.
Hubris,
really.
Yeah. Trying to escape culpability in something. Is just
avoid embarrassment.
Yeah. When it's something that's this massive, it's so compelling and fascinating and horrifying.
Right. Right. And that's when Legasov has that big speech that was my favorite writing, or my favorite dialogue, where he says that every lie incurs a debt to the truth, and eventually that debt has to be paid, and that debt was paid by the paying of that debt was an explosion of a nuclear reactor. Right. And that was, he says, what causes an RBMK reactor to explode, which is asked a handful of times throughout the series. He finally says lies. And I was like, holy shit, that is just an unbelievably good metaphor. Yeah. And I wonder,
so good.
I wonder if Craig Mazin came up with that. I wonder if anyone's ever, I recently purchased the book Voices from Chernobyl, which is what Craig Mazin used for a lot of this, this series. I'm wondering if maybe, the author of that coined that phrase or that metaphor, came up with that metaphor. If Craig Mazin came up with it, that's seriously some of the best writing I've.
Oh, absolutely.
That was just an incredibly good metaphor and just beautiful dialogue scene. Unfortunately, it never happened.
Right.
But that was creative license that I think was important because, the actual reveal of this flaw took place over time and, it was kind of revealed throughout the scientific community.
Yeah.
It was kind of revealed throughout the scientific community through his audio tapes that he released. And, it was contingent upon him committing suicide. Everyone, that was I think an important point that I don't know it was in the show, but Craig Mazin made it in the podcast that, there were these audio tapes circulating of what really happened, that Legasov recorded before he died. And he said that if he had not committed suicide, it would not have been taken anywhere near as seriously. So he's truly the hero. I mean, there are literally thousands of heroes.
Absolutely.
For this crisis, but I think he's, I don't want to say he's the best hero or anything, but I'm saying that's one of the more incredible things from this story is what he did.
Totally.
Him killing himself. I don't know. And there was another not fun, that's a terrible word to say, but thinking of a thought exercise, I think it was in the first podcast episode, maybe the second, Craig Mazin said he thought about if this disaster had happened in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
He said, it's almost like a blessing that it happened in the Soviet Union, if it was going to happen, because the Soviets considered their people a resource. Look at World War II. Look at how many Soviet people died.
Right, yeah.
Their people are just another resource, just like oil or whatever. Food, I don't know. And so they used their resources to fix problems. And so they basically used up these people to fix this problem. And when you use a person up, you kill them, which is a horrible thing. And in the United States, we're not willing to do that.
Right.
We don't do that.
And that's evident in so many parts of the miniseries. Again, I almost call it a documentary, but it's so I guess the audacity of a governing entity just being so reckless with their people is so the inhumanity of that is just so staggering and when they were getting the 3 people to go in knowing that they're gonna die, which apparently they didn't, which I thought was interesting.
They didn't immediately die.
They didn't.
I think he said 2 of them are still alive.
Wow.
If I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, but I think he said that.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
But, just that, and just, all of that is just, it's insane to me. It's mind-boggling.
I think he said that if, in the podcast, Craig Mazin said that if this had happened in the United States, basically nobody would live in the United States anymore, because we would just be if we send anyone in there, they're going to die, so everybody has to leave, and eventually it would, poison the groundwater, and it would get all the way to the Mississippi River or whatever it is, and it would literally just poison the entire continental United States and probably parts of Canada and Mexico, and we'd all have to go live in Bolivia or something, and I was just that's incredible, because when you think about it, 1,000 square miles in Eastern Europe is kind of a good job. They kind of did a good job, it could have been so much worse than that. Speaking of that part where it was the climax of episode 2 where the 3 guys go down into to open up the sluice valves. That was absolutely terrifying.
Oh, totally.
That would it was amazing how many different elements of genre were kind of touched in this series. There's, obviously just absolute drama and tragedy. Obviously, that's the obvious one, but that was damn near straight up a horror movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Or suspense.
Yeah, and just it cutting out with just pitch black.
Right.
To end the episode was just so just gripping and horrifying.
And it especially hit home for me because I have to sometimes
I thought about that.
I have to work in industrial settings.
Right.
So I've never been to a nuclear power plant, but
knock on wood.
Plumbing is plumbing, and commercial level plumbing is pretty similar throughout a lot of different buildings. And I've seen creepy, scary industrial settings like that. And it's even when they're just normally functioning and the lights are on, it's kind of a little bit unnerving to be in those areas sometimes, because if you make a wrong step, you could fall and die or, stuff like that. And not that my job is anywhere near as dangerous as working at a nuclear power plant or anything. I'm not trying to say that, but I've had those notions before.
Sure.
And so it hit me extra hard that day. I've been in utility tunnels and stuff like that. It's freaky when things are normal.
I can imagine. I couldn't do that. I've told you before I couldn't do that job.
Yeah.
Also, we referenced that in our Castle Rock reviews on Tower Junkies, but and also a lot of times you like the miners in Chernobyl, you do that completely naked.
That's how my father did his job. So.
Yeah. But yeah, just so great. So anything else really?
Man, I feel like I could talk about this for an hour again.
I really want to watch it again. And you mentioned Voices from Chernobyl. I really just consume audiobooks at this point.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not on Audible.
Really?
Yeah, and they have a paperback that's coming out next month, a new paperback.
Oh,
edition.
really? Okay.
Yeah, I thought about pre-ordering it, but I'm gonna kind of wait and see if Audible gets it.
Interesting.
But I did, just on a whim, bought Midnight in Chernobyl on Audible. So
what's that one?
The definitive, dramatic, untold story of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster based on original reporting and new archival research.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know when it came out or when it was published, but we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, so we both have our supplemental reading.
Nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just reiterate how phenomenal I think this was. I don't think there was a moment of wasted time. I don't think it was too short. I don't think they didn't give us enough information in places. My only minor, I don't even know if this is a qualm or a nitpick, but I think it would have been interesting for them to show the final, there's a structure that's been built around
sarcophagus.
Yeah, the sarcophagus that they built. Because that's kind of, definitive thing. That would have been interesting to see, but I think Craig Mazin said in the podcast that it took a decade to build it, and he's it wouldn't really have been interesting,
right?
It wouldn't have been an interesting scene. There's no
in context of the story,
right?
The way that he was telling it, yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think it was better left on the cutting room floor or never shot in the first place.
Did we get a shot of that, in the closing credits where it's telling everything?
Yeah, there's a picture of it, and I think that was sufficient.
Yeah,
in my mind. And also, I have so many questions about. They covered so much between the podcast and the show,
right?
Like you said, so much detail, which was again, I don't think there was anything that was left out that was critical, but there are still there's so many. It's such a complex event, and this, like I said, the science is just complex. I think in the podcast, it was in one of the podcast episodes, Craig Mazin mentioned that this was only one of 4 reactors in that location. And he said that, so reactor 4 blew, he said that reactors 1 through 3 continued to run for years.
Yeah.
And the last one was shut down in the year 2000. My question is, who the hell was running those things?
Right.
Did they have people who went into the exclusion zone every single day to run these fucking, did they automate them? How did that work? And I'm just so curious. I want to ask somebody, or research it somehow, how they did that.
Yeah.
Cause I'd be who the hell did you get to do that job? I mean,
this doesn't even make sense, or this doesn't even track, but you might say you're, Marie Curie is.
Jesus.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I agree. It's a fun show.
Yeah.
No, very just, I feel like I'm just repeating myself and everything. And I just, between the podcast and the show and everything, there's really, I'm kind of dancing around because I don't have much input to it either. But yeah, just really incredible. And I can't wait for Hulu to come out with their 3 Mile Island miniseries.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Right. They're not really.
I know.
I know. That would be interesting, though.
Yeah, I don't really know much about that event either.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What was the one that in Japan?
Fukushima?
Fukushima?
Fukushima? Is that
I almost
right?
said Fukunaga, which is the
director and writer.
Yeah.
I think it's Fukushima, isn't it?
That sounds right.
That's right. That obviously is not the same level of accident as Chernobyl, but I think... I don't know. Again, I still don't really understand how a nuclear reactor works.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the extent of that issue is.
Yeah.
But I know that there's...
It was Fukushima.
Yeah. I know there's an unfortunate amount of radiation that has leaked into the surrounding areas of Fukushima and leaked into the ocean and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know to what extent, and I haven't really researched it and stuff like that. But
yeah. Do you think, are you going to research other stuff like that? Like
maybe. There was a... Gosh, I wish I could remember what it's called, but there was a really good documentary that came out, I think from like 3 to 5 years ago, that was on Netflix, and it was about nuclear energy and how, there's this rush towards green energy right now, and people aren't talking about nuclear, and it's because it's stigmatized because of 3 Mile and Chernobyl, and it basically made the case that it's probably one of the best options for green energy because like most of the nuclear power plants were built in the like 70s and 80s. And obviously after Chernobyl and stuff, like they didn't build anymore because everybody was scared shitless. And so like the building codes and like all the technology is all 30, 40 years old. And so if there was R&D going into nuclear power for the last 30 plus years, it would be at a ridiculously safe level. And like there's like people, they were basically making the case for nuclear energy. And like all these qualms that people have about it really aren't anywhere near as bad as they think. Exposure to radiation is still a somewhat mysterious thing. Like they don't know, they're still not really sure what an acceptable level of radiation is.
Right.
Part of it is that everyone's different, But they explored that in the documentary, and they said, like one of the issues that people have is the waste that it produces.
Okay.
And apparently there's like 70 nuclear power plants in the United States or something like that. I could be way off. There could be 170.
Right.
But they all send their waste to one location, and it's all in like one building. Like it's not like so if we had like 10,000 nuclear reactors, it really wouldn't be that much waste. Like it's really not as big of a problem as people think it is.
Right.
Like it could all be contained very easily, and it could be contained very safely, and it wouldn't be it's like 10,000 nuclear reactors could have the same footprint as one landfill for a city the size of Indianapolis. Which is like nothing when you think about, the waste we produce from garbage and all that stuff. So anyways, I wish I could remember the name of that documentary, but it's really fascinating, and it's comparing these two, the information I got from that to what I saw in this series. It's like, pump the brakes, it's such a, it's so much more emotional. Like there's so much more to Chernobyl than the science of it.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And it's a human story, even though there's so much science and physics involved.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's mostly a human story.
Totally. Was it a Nova documentary?
It could have been
the nuclear option.
I think that could be it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I looked it up. It's like a 55-minute documentary on Netflix. Check it out.
That might be it. But it was really fascinating.
Nice.
That documentary. So.
Yeah, well, anything else, or should we...
I think we can wrap it up, yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, we could talk about it for so much.
Yeah.
It would mostly just be regurgitating and heaping praise upon all the different parts of this, the podcast and the show.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, we really hope that they do more, like, podcasts for the shows.
Absolutely.
On, like, HBO and other streaming platforms.
Especially depictions of historical events.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to kind of wind down with the Potpourri section, which is the section of the podcast where we kind of talk about whatever we want, as long as it smells good. Movie or TV shows we've watched, news that have caught our eye, pretty much anything that's on our mind. So, Tiny, I have two things.
I have two things.
Ooh, whoa,
Yeah.
Hey, whoa. Okay, let's see. I'll start, because I'll start briefly. Oh, I'll start with the most recent one. So today after work, I realized I haven't seen a movie after work in a long time. So, and the last couple of weeks of work have been kind of rough. So, I figured, it'd be nice to kind of decompress. So, probably the only movie that really timed out enough to where I would be able to go see it after work without waiting a long time between work and the movie, while also coming home and having enough time to record with you. I watched Dark Phoenix.
Nice. Okay. I'm curious what.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not as people have been kind of dumping on it. It's okay. Dark Phoenix is presumably one of the last X-Men movies we'll get, because now Disney owns everything, and then apparently they're going to wait a little bit before they kind of introduce them to their arsenal.
Okay.
Which I'm fine with. But technically we also have the New Mutants coming out eventually, if it ever comes out. So, which I'm very, very excited about, because that one's directed by Josh Boone. I think it has Maisie Williams and a bunch of talented young actors.
Right.
And it's supposed to have a kind of horror kind of feel to it. But Dark Phoenix is the last episode, or the last movie of the First Class cast. Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, all of them. So, having said that, it is rehashing the Dark Phoenix saga storyline and everything that they tried to do in X-Men The Last Stand, which I guess it's not technically their fault that failed, because there was problems behind the scenes on that one, but now they didn't have that, and it still just didn't do anything for me.
Dang.
Yeah, it was okay. You get the kind of the emotional core of it with Jean Grey not being able to control her powers or anything. That was compelling enough, but that takes up 2/3 of the movie itself. And I feel like what they did with the other third should have been more even with that, to be more compelling and kind of come home, to bring it home. I don't know if that makes sense, because I'm trying to be vague, but basically, right. There was a disproportion in terms of story on the screen for Dark Phoenix. Performances are all okay. They're fine. Michael Fassbender's great. James McAvoy, Jennifer Lawrence, they're all great, but it just feels like either the script or the performers just felt lifeless in this movie. And it just felt just kind of it didn't have any propulsion to it. The action scenes were cool, but it was also okay, it's just standard operating procedure. There was some pretty cool inventive stuff they did. There's something that Nightcrawler does that was really cool. But other than that, it was just okay. I'm kind of struggling to talk about it, because I just saw it 3 or 4 hours ago. It just, it wasn't, Do you have any interest in seeing it? I
do, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, how was some of the action looks pretty cool in the trailer, and the visuals, did that at least hold up pretty well? Or?
It did, but again, it was they have certain set pieces throughout that's okay, I'll say this. The beginning part, in the beginning, there's a space mission that they have to do, which, granted, that's part of my kind of, it's on my Venn diagram. It crosses over into my Venn diagram
of interest. Wheelhouse.
In my wheelhouse, yes. So I was kind of predisposed to enjoy that, and visually it looked great. The way that the X-Men are utilized in that scene, in that sequence, is very cool and inventive, and it has that kind of hero kind of vibe to it, that they're superheroes. Also, that they're a team as well. And it's just they work together there. But other than that, there's there's a few set pieces spread throughout it, but it was just kind of okay, fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame. It's sort of what I was expecting as well. I didn't think there was much left. I feel like Days of Future Past was
the height.
Pretty much a perfect X-Men movie.
Totally.
I mean, not to say it was a perfect movie, but like a perfect X-Men movie, and that felt like a conclusive movie, and then they just kept it going.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt too. And also, like, it's kind of like X-Men Apocalypse and now Dark Phoenix are kind of making me kind of curious about revisiting Days of Future Past, because I remember, like, man, maybe this was just me making excuses for it, but like the way that Logan is, like there's some shaky stuff at the end, like in the last act of Days of Future Past, that like my memory can't reconcile it with the movie, because it feels like kind of just like it doesn't track well. Okay. So I'm kind of curious how I feel revisiting that, but Dark Phoenix was just, it was okay.
Better or worse than Apocalypse?
Better than Apocalypse. And I only say that because I don't even remember Apocalypse that well. That was just such an inconsequential movie for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've never had a desire to rewatch it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of, like, maybe I brought in a bias to Dark Phoenix, from that, because I was so soured on the franchise from that, but
gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know. But again, but then again, like, Logan was amazing, so
it was, yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, yeah, that's Dark Phoenix. I'm curious what Disney and Marvel Studios will do down the road.
Okay.
Yeah. What's your first potpourri?
The wife and I over the weekend watched the miniseries, limited series, I don't know what it's called, from the BBC called The Bodyguard, or just Bodyguard, starring Richard Madden from Game of Thrones. I had heard, I think it won a bunch of awards, and it was critically acclaimed and all that stuff, and it had been sitting on Netflix for a while, and we were looking for something new to watch. We had a really lazy Sunday. We didn't leave the house, didn't do anything. And so I was like, I've heard this is really good, and like, I think we'll both like it. And she was like, all right, let's see what it's like. I showed her the trailer, and she was like, all right. It turned out to be really good. It's a really great series. It's kind of like Richard Madden plays like a London police officer. Okay. And he's thrown into this extraordinary situation right off the bat. And it's all about like kind of this terrorist threat against the citizens and persons of London, if you will, and really the British government. I'm being kind of vague, and I just don't want to spoil anything, but it's really, really well done, and it doesn't pull punches, which is what I really appreciated. There's kind of some aspects to the story that are kind of politically charged or controversial, and they don't tiptoe around that. And I appreciated that. They were pretty blunt about it. And the show was just super intense. I think the trailer depicts like the opening scene where he's on a train. Check out the trailer and you'll see that part. That is like one of the more intense TV scenes I've ever seen. Like, it's really, really well done. And there's just several, it's not an action show by any means. But there are a handful or more scenes throughout, I think was it 8 episodes, I want to say?
It looks like it was
it 6?
6.
6 episodes.
I just had it, yeah.
It was 6 episodes.
I think it was 6, yeah.
There's like at least a handful of like action scenes, and they are super good. Like, they reminded me of like, kind of like, not quite like Christopher Nolan level action, but in that same sort of wheelhouse, like just the practicality of the action scenes was really satisfying. I mean, just super intense, first of all, and then just the realism of them, just very realistic scenes, just really impressed the shit out of me. Also, Richard Madden was great. Like, I mean, he was really good as Robb Stark. But I think this was different because he's the lead and he's the main focus, and he's in almost every scene. And so, whereas in Game of Thrones, we got, he would only be in 10 minutes of an episode, Right. It was really cool seeing him as a lead. He's really good. Okay. I mean, definitely a leading guy. And he's using his native accent. He's from Scotland, so it's a very thick, really thick accent. But it's super intense and really suspenseful, and but still, it's not like just this simple anti-terrorist story or whatever. It's got a good deal of complexity to it. I wasn't sure where it was going to go. I mean, it was unpredictable. It's super, super good. I highly rate. It's only 6 episodes. We watched it in a day.
Nice.
It was one of those things where we're just going to binge this whole damn thing. So, it's really good. I highly recommend it.
Very nice. I'm gonna have to check that out. For sure. Have you, let me check to see if it's actually airing right now, but that's what I was going to ask, regarding Bodyguard. Is it like a series or?
It's a miniseries.
Okay. So it's like those 6 episodes and we're done?
Yes. I think it's,
okay.
I think it was BBC.
Okay.
I think that's who it was.
Nice.
Yeah. There's a bit of a disconnect though, cause there's a bunch of, like acronyms and British terms that we weren't familiar with. Not that it like takes you out of it or that like you can't understand it, but like they just use some terminology that's sort of a bit of a curveball, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. It's not that important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you started Big Little Lies season 2?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I think we might wait till all the episodes come out and binge it.
I think, because I still haven't watched the first season. I know you loved it.
Yeah.
I think what I might do, and don't hold me to this, even though it's only 14 episodes all told.
Yeah.
But when it's all done, we should do like an episode that's just talking about Big Little Lies. Because
totally.
I'll watch it. That'll force me to watch it.
Nice.
Absolutely
remarkable acting.
Nice.
In Big Little Lies.
And I love Meryl Streep's in season 2. Like, that's just nuts to me.
Yeah. Has she ever done TV, really?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Not at least since the beginning of her career that I can think of. Yeah.
Which that kind of leads me into my next potpourri, my next and last. Forever. No, not really. So, I just mentioned like, I'll watch Big Little Lies, for the podcast and everything. It'll force me to watch it. I have been burning the candle at both ends, for a while. Like, I took the day off, June 5th, from work so I could just sit at home and watch Black Mirror. Mm-hmm. Those 3 episodes that came out, probably, in retrospect, probably not a good idea. Just because, like, I ended up having to work extra throughout the week just because I didn't want to use 8 hours of PTO for 3 episodes of Black Mirror. But it just, I wanted to just set aside time to watch it because I've been, like, knee deep in the Twilight Zone, like doing anthology stuff and like the new Twilight Zone, and it's just been it's been a lot, like, really. And I made the very wise decision to start pairing original Twilight Zone episodes with science fiction theater episodes from 1955. So like I'm it's a lot, and also with school and everything, it's tough to kind of. It's weird because I'm finding myself getting into the mindset of watching things because of assignments, like assignment watching as opposed to just recreational watching.
Right. So
recently I've tried to counter that by first of all, this is highly unhealthy, but I have a very long list of, I shit you not, like probably 40 shows.
Jeez.
That are all just shows that have come, gone, still airing, like, on my radar over the last, like, several years. And I just kind of want to keep that. I got really bored and I put how many seasons are in each one. So it's ridiculous. But I just kind of I wanted to watch something just to watch something. Like, I didn't want the baggage of like saying like, okay, I'll mention this on the podcast. I'll like taking notes during it, saying like, oh, that correlates to something from an earlier episode. I just really want to watch something because my brain is turning into just mush. So I have started, and just by saying that I've started these things is probably putting casting a pall over it or cursing me to never finish them. But I have begun watching Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Ooh.
Which is fun. Which I'll start there. So, first of all, the show is fine. It's good. Mm-hmm. Not only like a few episodes into it, but like this is the stepping stone. Like this was my first stepping stone toward this whole like watch something just to watch something without the baggage of a podcast to do it. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, I was thinking like, man, Star Trek has so much like we could do like a whole podcast about that.
Oh my God.
And like I had to stop myself from like wandering that way. And then my crutch for this is I looked for a podcast devoted to Star Trek: The Next Generation so I could listen to it as I watch it. Like that's my crutch toward watching like something recreationally.
Yeah.
So I found Star Trek: The Next Conversation with Matt Myra and another writer from the Goldbergs.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun. It's entertaining. It's fun. I like it.
Cool.
But the other thing, like the next step of that, like I haven't, not for a lack of trying, but I haven't found a podcast to correlate to this other show, but I started watching and am very much enjoying The X-Files.
Awesome.
So good. Like, first of all, I'm watching both of these on Amazon Prime. And Amazon Prime, it's amazing. Like, I love that clearly that they have like the HD widescreen version of it. And it looks beautiful. Like,
nice.
It looks gorgeous.
Nice.
And I think that Star Trek: The Next Generation and The X-Files are a perfect like pairing for me to retrain myself to not overthink or do things too much or overdo anything, because they're like, at least Star Trek is almost damn near an anthology series, as the original series was. There's very little like connective tissue. It's just like adventures in space.
Right.
And then the X-Files has their overarching things, but like they also have Monsters of the Week. And I'm in like, the X-Files is so close to, like, it's very much influenced by other science fiction shows of its past, namely the Twilight Zone. So like I'm getting such a Twilight Zone-y vibe off of it. I've caught some references, or I've put into it references to like Stephen King that maybe are intentional or maybe not. Well, one, they reference Carrie, like, directly. They said they made a reference to Carrie in, like, episode 4 or 5. But there's, like, another episode early on where, I think a recurring character in the grand scheme of things, is a mutated person who, the episode's called Squeeze, who he comes out and hunts or feasts on, like, kills people and eats their livers every, like, 30 years.
Yeah.
Tombs.
That's a great one.
Yeah. And, like, the first time we see him, he's, like, in a sewer drain staring at his next victim. I'm like, a sewer drain every, like, 30 years or so? Like, are they doing a riff on it? It's like, it was really good. So I'm enjoying that. Like, it's a cathartic experience for me to actually, like, try to watch something just to watch something.
Awesome.
Because even with like rewatching Lost with Kirsten, it's for the podcast. Like it's hard being me. It's hard being me.
What's the name of the showrunner, head writer of Breaking Bad?
Vince Gilligan.
Vince Gilligan. He was involved with some like middle seasons of X-Files for a while. So
I think I want to say like around season 4 or 5. I believe Robert, longtime friend of the show's, gave me, or like back on Patreon when I did Patreon selected user review or bonus reviews on Anthology, he picked a Vince Gilligan scripted episode of the X-Files.
Nice.
That's good.
I think that's how he met
Bryan Cranston.
I don't know. I was thinking of the cop character. I haven't watched Breaking Bad in so long.
Dean Norris.
Dean Norris. I think that's how I met, because Dean Norris was in like 3 X-Files episodes, I think.
That's awesome.
I think I might be wrong, but yeah.
To tie it back to Anthology also, just because I'm, I have such a huge head. Glenn Morgan is a worked heavily on the X-Files. He was an executive producer on X-Files throughout its run, I believe.
Okay.
He is also one of the executive producers and writers on the new Twilight Zone.
Oh, cool.
He wrote 3 episodes, or he wrote 2 episodes and co-wrote 1. He wrote A Traveler, co-wrote 6 Degrees of Freedom, and I'm blanking on I think he wrote, no, I don't know, he wrote something else. But anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why, like, a lot of people have pointed out in the podcast verse that A Traveler in this new iteration of the Twilight Zone feels a lot like an X-Files episode.
Nice.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. And also, last thing on X-Files, and I'll probably report back on it in the coming weeks and everything.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's massive. I love that it's massive, because it's got it's got 9 seasons plus 2 movies plus 2 seasons for the revival, so like 11 seasons, 9 of which I believe are all like 22, 24 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got my work cut out for me. Not my work, because it's recreational.
Right.
Yeah. So it's good. But last thing about that is, I lost it. I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah. Wow. I completely spaced it.
The first movie is really good.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. The second one, not so much.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
I will say the end of episode 4 of the X-Files, spoiler alert for the X-Files, but, well, not really spoiler alert, but, Scully plays a tape from the episode ends with her playing a tape, from a psychiatrist meeting with little kid Mulder.
Mm-hmm.
And it's he's talking about how he hears voices that saying that his sister's going to come back and she's going to be okay. And he hears this voice and he hears this voice. And then just I'm getting chills just about to say this. But the episode ends with the psychiatrist being like, "Do you believe the voice?" And then Mulder's just like, "I want to believe." And I'm like, "Oh my god, that's like the tagline of the show."
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm really, really, really liking that. The 5 or 6 episodes I've watched.
Nice.
But yeah, it's good stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would love to rewatch it all someday.
Yeah.
Well, I think I watched it as a kid, as it was airing.
Do you want to start a podcast?
No.
Okay.
I do not.
That's fine.
I think I only got to season 4 or 5 before I stopped watching it. And so after that, I never watched any of that stuff.
Interesting.
So
I tweeted about this, but the obviously the opening theme music for people our age is terrifying.
Yeah.
But what was funny is that I isolated what was terrifying about it to me. There's a shot where it's an apparition is walking down stairs during it. And that, as a kid, always freaked me out because I was terrified of ghosts.
Yeah.
But what's funny is that it has just a bunch of creepy imagery and stuff. And then at one point during it just says the words paranormal activity.
Yeah.
And I tweeted this, but I kind of feel like it's my I kind of I get the sense that it's okay, well, let's just the opening theme music will be really creepy. That this song is really creepy. Let's just put a bunch of really creepy supernatural imagery in there. And then it's we've got 4 seconds that we've tapped out all of our imagery stuff, all of our images. We need 4 seconds to cover, and then the head person being I don't know, put some paranormal activity on there.
Nice.
And then the guy just being do I type it on there? Okay, fine. But yeah, really digging it.
Nice.
And yeah, so
that's cool.
Want to round us out?
Yeah, this will be really brief too.
Okay.
So the wife and I were looking for a new show to start and everything, and I've continued to hear great things about Fargo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so Paige had never seen the movie before.
Okay.
And so she was interested in the show, and she was like, "Well, do I need to see the movie first?" And I was like, "I don't think so, but I think you should, because it's a really good movie. It's one of the best movies in the 90s easily." I was like, we should watch it. And she was like, "Okay, I'll watch it." And so we watched the movie, which fucking great. Just holds up every time.
Oh yeah.
Makes me laugh every time. and so then she loved it, and I was really pleased because I wasn't sure, because it's a dark comedy, and it's almost like it's hard to tell, even if you know someone really well, it's hard to tell if they're gonna like the movie or not.
Sure,
because it's such a one of a kind movie. And so we watched the first 2 episodes of the show, and I am all in. It's fantastic. I was curious how they were going to go about it, how they were going to make it their own, which they totally do. And I was curious. I was like, so is the whole first season going to be kind of like a rehash of the movie? Like, I understand, like, there's got to be some elements of the movie in there. Like, I'm just curious how they're going to do it. And I love the decision they made. You know, I'm only 2 episodes in, and just the way they kind of dealt with the story from the movie, I think was really, really good. Like I said, they really made it their own, while still paying great homage to the film. So, it feels like a Coen Brothers TV show.
Totally.
I mean,
absolutely. And I love how it kind of mixes some things. Not to get there's no real spoilers here because you've watched the first 2 episodes, but like it's Fargo, but they put their own unique spin on it. It's a very loose, it's not Fargo. It's Fargo,
right,
as a concept. But they introduce Billy Bob Thornton as this. He's in it, right? That's Billy Bob Thornton. Yeah. It's been a while since I watched that. But he's this Anton Chigurh kind of character from No Country for Old Men, and it's it's so cool.
He's also kind of a fun amalgam of Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare's character from the movie.
Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah, because he's very stoic, but he also kind of talks a lot, which Steve Buscemi wouldn't shut the fuck up in the movie,
right? Which
is kind of funny. But yeah, he's kind of a fun amalgam of those 2 characters, I think.
Yeah,
and
yep.
So I'm cool. Really looking forward to watching more of it. Paige loves it too.
Very good.
I had no idea how great the cast was.
Oh my, it's insane.
I knew Billy Bob Thornton was in it, but I didn't know about Martin Freeman and Adam Goldberg. There's just
Alison Tolman. Yes.
Just a great cast. So
yep. Cool. Well, I think that about does it.
Yep.
Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah. Oh geez.
Oh yeah. Don't you know? Well, thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any comments or anything, feedback or anything for us, let us know. Tweet me at obsessiveviewer, send us emails, Matt at obsessiveviewer.com, Tiny at obsessiveviewer.com. Facebook, Facebook.com/obsessiveviewer. All this stuff is going to be in the pre-record outro, but I do want to mention that if you wouldn't mind, leaving us a rating and review, that'd be great, but also check out our other shows. Tower Junkies, we just did a very fun, Stephen King news roundup thing. We've got some fun stuff in the pipeline for Tower Junkies. And then also, as I've said before, just all of my anthology stuff. Original Twilight Zone, science fiction theater, Jordan McFly's favorite TV show, and Black Mirror, and the new Twilight Zone and everything. All that, anthologypod.com. I'm really proud of the content that I've been pumping out there. So check that out. And yeah, did we decide what we're going to do next week? I pitched something. Oh, the Game of Thrones documentary and origin story.
Right.
So maybe that. We'll see.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
And now, here's a short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. To hear the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. Poor Pizza. She doesn't know how to help. She's not now. I made this joke to Molly and Yuri, but I was I just, for some stupid reason, when Pizza looks at it, I just picture her being like, yeah, well, now I can fix her, but, and I don't know what the rest of that is. It's just her saying now I can fix her, but, yeah. But I'm gonna need 3 toys.
You can fix her, but it's gonna cost you.
Yeah.
What's your catnip situation at the moment?
The Obsessive Viewer podcast is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to ObsessiveViewer.com/OV archive. You can also like our Facebook page and join the OV Facebook group at Facebook.com/TheObsessiveViewer. And follow us on Twitter at ObsessiveViewer and at ObsessiveTiny. And follow our recurring co-hosts at I am Mike White, that's me, at R.A. Feckus, and at Burger_Lurker. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at ObsessiveViewer.com/donate. Or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at Patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. For official Obsessive Viewer merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, visit our TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at ObsessiveViewer.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at teepublic.com, T-E-E, public.com. For information about our annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberInIrvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to ObsessiveViewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find Anthology, Matt's solo podcast covering The Twilight Zone, and other classic and contemporary science fiction anthology TV shows at anthologypod.com and on Twitter at OVAnthologyPod. You can also find Tower Junkies, a podcast where Matt and Tiny share their love of all things Stephen King and his magnum opus, the Dark Tower series, at TowerJunkiesPod.com and at TowerJunkiesPod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. The theme music for The Obsessive Viewer comes courtesy of the band Loudlike from their EP Mistakes We Must Make. Additional bumper music is provided courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Kitty!